everybody. We are back here with Dr. David Hanscom, the author of Back in Control, and just an absolutely brilliant person. And he's been an amazing influence in my life. Just getting to know him virtually, just through emails and his book, and we've done 2 brain chats together. So thanks so much for being back on Brain Chat, Dr. Hanscom.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Always enjoyed our conversations. It's great.
Likewise. So a lot of people on the page already know all about you, but can you just tell everyone a little bit about yourself and what you're up to currently these days?
Okay. I'm a spine surgeon. I practiced spine surgery from 1986 to 2018. I retired in December to pursue this whole chronic pain project full time. And what happened from about 1990 to 2003, 13, 14 years, I developed chronic pain myself, manifested really by severe anxiety. I went from being literally a fearless spine surgeon, going to one of the top spine fellowships in the world, to having anxiety and panic attacks in one day. And I did come out of that hole for almost 13 years. And I thought anxiety was a psychological issue. I went to counseling, I took medication, I did everything possible on this planet to solve my anxiety. It actually evolved into a full-blown obsessive compulsive disorder, which is a nasty, nasty disorder with extreme anxiety provoking thoughts, vivid imagery, and it's just the worst nightmare ever. I now know that anxiety is not psychological. It's actually a neurochemical survival reflex. It's about 1,000,000 times stronger than the conscious brain, and so you can't control it psychologically. It's just not a psychological issue. And I'd like to start the program. I know today we're going to talk about the family, but I wrote a book called, so I came out of chronic pain in 2003. I got out of it by luck. I started these expressive writing exercises that you and I have talked about. And just for the audience's sake, in 1982, Dr. Pennebaker out of Austin, Texas, and Dr. Smythe, and also Dr. Wegner, started doing experiments on expressive writing. And a lot of it was emotional writing, a lot of it was just neutral writing, but they did all sorts of writing exercises. And they found out that writing had a profound effect on people's both mood and physical function. So it doubled skin healing. It improved rheumatoid arthritis. It improved asthma. It improved student performance. It decreased anxiety. And there's over 1,000 research papers that point out that the different forms of expressive writing somehow break up these obsessive thought patterns. I had him on my podcast about 6 weeks ago, and I asked him, well, what's going on? How does it work? He goes, I don't know. And so there's something about externalizing your thoughts. You can't control your thoughts, but you can separate from them. Anyway, that simple expressive writing exercise that I found out by accident broke up a 15-year tailspin of anxiety beyond words. I, of course, being a physician, had tried everything, and nothing worked. Things kept getting much, much worse. And within 2 weeks after I started these writing exercises, I felt a little bit of a shift. And by 6 weeks, probably about a 70% shift. And then about 6 months later, I realized that anger and anxiety are linked reactions. And as I crossed the anger threshold, of which I didn't think I had any, my symptoms started to disappear. And I've been, basically free of chronic pain now for about, I don't know, probably 15 years now. And again, these are permanent circuits, so they come back and forth. But in the big picture, not only have I come out of that hole of chronic pain and extreme anxiety, I've been able to thrive. What I'm excited about, I'm going to share these tools with my patients. And I think the reason why the book has been so effective, the book is Back in Control, A Surgeon's Roadmap Out of Chronic Pain. The website is backincontrol.com, which is the action plan of the book. And I think why the process has been so effective is that I literally spent 15 years in that hole, literally crawling out a millimeter at a time. And people look at me because I'm thriving, and I'm going, right. But I mean, I was gone. I had no chance of escape. I was completely gone. So I've been able to understand where people are in the hole and trying to come out of the hole, where they're at, and I'm able to help coach them out of that hole pretty consistently. But I just want to talk about anxiety for a second, because we're talking today on the family reactions. And it turns out that the family reactions and triggers, I'll explain what a trigger is in a second, is probably the most powerful force keeping people in chronic pain. Because what's perverse about the human condition is that the deeper your relationships, the deeper your reactions to people that are close to you. So the people that you care about the most actually are your biggest triggers. It's very, very perverse. We found out that you can treat all these aspects of chronic pain, writing, relaxation, forgiveness, play, all these things can happen. But if you go home and get triggered, it just all goes out the window. Conversely, we found out if you set up some rules around these reactions in the household, is equally as powerful as pulling people out of pain. How's that for a short introduction?
Love it. No, I think, I'm really excited about tonight's talk because I know sometimes people separate things. And I think to be able to understand chronic pain with anxiety is a very important component. And then to tie it all to family, I think something is people just don't think about.
Well, let me explain anxiety. First of all, I'd encourage the audience to look at a website post I wrote called Anxiety is a Symptom, Not a Disease. And I don't know about you, but I think most of us are taught that anxiety is somehow a psychological issue, right?
Sure.
Okay. But the unconscious brain processes 11 million bits of information per second. Eyes, ears, nose, throat, skin, the whole thing. I mean, it's processing, and everything really is on autopilot. It's an incredible system. The rational brain processes 40. So you have 11 bits of information per second versus 40 with the brain. So whatever's going on in the unconscious brain is way out of our control, right? Let's say, for instance, so any threat, whether it's a physical threat or a mental threat, is met with a chemical reaction that says danger. So your body's full of adrenaline, cortisol, histamines, and endorphins. And when you're full of those body chemicals, what do you feel? You feel anxious, right? Anxiety is just a descriptive term that describes the state of your body's chemistry. Instead of saying, I'm anxious, just say, my body source chemicals are elevated. And what it does, it depersonalizes the process because you have to have anxiety to survive. It turns out, and this has been known for a long time, is that the species of creatures that survived, whether it's a mammal or fish or humans, they have to have a survival response to survive. The species that didn't pay attention to their environmental cues didn't survive. On top of being survival of the fittest, is actually survival of the most anxious. So we're different than cats and dogs and different animals because we have language. Every animal has a reaction to survive. Humans have a problem where we have language that we can put a label on it. Okay. Now let's say you're lying on the beach in the sun, just totally asleep on vacation, totally relaxed. Your body's full of oxytocin, the love drug, serotonin, antidepressant, dopamine, reward drug, and the GABA drugs are like Valium. So you're laying on the beach full of this chemical bath. How do you feel?
Not anxious.
Right. You feel relaxed, right?
Yes.
Okay. So so relaxed is describing the state of your body's chemistry, right? Okay. You wouldn't call relaxed a diagnosis, correct? It's just a description. It just describes your chemical state. Same thing with anxiety. It's not a diagnosis. It's simply describing the state of your body's chemistry. Now, there's a gradation where you're alert, then you're nervous, then you're afraid, and then you're paranoid, then you're terrorized, right? I mean, there's a word play on anxiety. So just being alert is a little bit of anxiety. And that's what's necessary to survive. And then some people, for a long time, you actually thrive on the adrenaline. You actually think that becomes sort of a norm. But in general, high levels of stress chemicals actually start beating up your body pretty badly. Humans have a problem that I call the curse of consciousness, where thoughts and concepts create the same chemical reaction as a physical threat. The problem is that humans have is that you can't escape your thoughts. Every human being is subjected to an endless barrage of thoughts that create this chemical reaction. We all, unless we understand the issues of how to solve it, we all are exposed to various levels of these stress chemicals. And what happens, we try to talk about it, talk it out, we try all these things to escape it, but we're using rational means to deal with this irrational survival response. It can't work. It doesn't work. And as you know, anxiety disorders are just exploding. And the problem is we have the wrong model. So I'm going to ask you a question that I'll just tell you that you're not going to get the answer to. Okay. I'm just doing it for teaching purposes. Okay. Okay.
Deal.
All right. So so I'll ask you a question. So this concept of anxiety is maybe different than what you've heard before?
Yes.
Fair statement? Okay. All right. So can I ask you if you have anxiety?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So now you're anxious for some reason. Just you don't have to tell us what it is. Just think about something that makes you anxious.
Okay.
You got it?
Yeah.
All right. What do you do to lower the anxiety?
Personally,
Just a generic question. What do you do to lower the anxiety?
I try to exercise.
Okay, so that's how to do it, but the answer you're looking for is to lower the anxiety, you lower your stress chemicals.
Yes.
Okay, that's the key. Now, there's a bunch of ways of doing that. Okay, that's where people miss the question, because we're always thinking of anxiety as something to be fixed or solved. Just view anxiety as a barometer where thermometers tells you your levels of stress chemicals. Just like when you relax, super relax, it tells you your levels of relaxation chemicals and reward chemicals, right? Just look at anxiety as a level of your stress chemicals. Okay, so there's two ways of decreasing anxiety. One of them is directly, and you and I talked about active meditation a little bit.
Yes.
Okay. So just have your listening audience, everybody sit back in your chairs. And what you're doing with active meditation, you can't control your thoughts. In other words, you either suppress them, suffer with them, or mask them, but none of those works. In fact, the more you try not to think about something, as you well know, you think about it more, right? Your brain's going to develop wherever you place your neurological attention. So what happens when you do what's called active meditation, you simply switched sensory input. So just drop your shoulders for a second, about 3 to 5 seconds, 20, 30 times a day, and just feel the back of your chair. Okay, drop your shoulders, drop your jaw muscles, let your hands relax. Everybody do this. Okay, you might have noticed my voice drop just a little bit. Okay, how does that feel?
Better.
Better. Okay, so what you did is that you dropped your body's stress chemicals because you switched sensory input. You went from racing thoughts to just feeling the chair. That's it. It's not any more complicated than that. Active meditation is one of the basic tools of actually directly decreasing your stress chemicals. Okay, so I'll just ask you the question again for fun. If your anxiety's up, what do you do to get rid of the anxiety?
Reduce your anxiety chemicals.
Right, reduce, so you can't quite get rid of the word, can you?
Sorry.
Just substitute the word stress chemicals instead of the word anxiety.
Stress.
What's interesting is that once you understand that, it's just a marker, really depersonalizes it, because what happens, people actually identify with their anxiety, right? I'm an anxious person, right? Well, you're alive, right? That's why you're alive, because you have anxiety. It's not going to go away, right? Okay, but the more we fight it, the more we give it neurological attention. So just dropping your shoulders, visualization, exercise. There was the correct answer that you said about exercise. That's a way of dropping stress chemicals. But the bottom line is, whatever works for you, all you want to do is just substitute the word stress chemicals instead of the word anxiety. And you've actually just now have a different feedback loop of the state of your body's chemistry. Right? That's it.
You kind of make anxiety lose its power in a sense.
Well, you're right. You de-energize it. So, correct. Absolutely. And that's a very good observation. Okay. The other way you decrease anxiety, which is equally important, maybe more important, is that we've talked about the term neuroplasticity, right?
Yes.
What you're doing, you're changing the reaction. So instead of having a large stress chemical response, remember, stress isn't the problem, it's a chemical response. Just being alive and taking care of yourself is stressful. So people get a lot of stress in their lives, but stress isn't the problem, it's that chemical reaction to it. And what happens when you're constantly reacting to stress with elevated body chemistry, it just wears you out. People get chronic fatigue syndrome. So what happens, you have these racing thoughts, and what you do, instead of being stress, automatic survival response, is going to be stress, a little bit of a space, then new response. And with neuroplasticity, as you know, you have awareness, then you separate, and then you redirect. The reason why the expressive writing is so critical, because I think the expressive writing puts a piece of paper here, you're here. You've now created a space between you and your thoughts. You can't escape your thoughts, but you've now separated from them. And what you do, thoughts are here, you're here. It can be positive or negative, doesn't matter. And then you write these things down, 5, 10, 15 minutes, once or twice a day. That's it. And then you tear them up, and you tear them up for two reasons. One of them is to write with freedom. But the more important reason is to not analyze it. Because when you write, all these issues come up, correct?
Mm-hmm.
They're not issues, right? They're just thoughts.
Right.
So, and you're not tearing them up to get rid of the thoughts, because there are trillions of thoughts. You're not getting rid of these things. But to me, it's just a metaphor for separation. You have awareness separation, then just drop your shoulders a second, and then you just redirect. Okay, so that's what neuroplasticity is, just all day long, just writing once or twice a day. You're doing awareness separation reprogramming. And the final metaphor I want to leave you with before jumping into the family issues is that what you're doing as you do this awareness separation reprogramming is that you're directly stimulating your brain to change. You're rewiring your brain. Again, instead of being stress automatic survival response, it's a more appropriate response. And next time that stress comes along, you have a more appropriate response in place. So just repetition is really a pretty big deal here. So what you're doing, you're training your body to have a different reaction. And the metaphor I like to use is learning a new language. If you're going to learn Spanish, for instance, you're going to go to class, learn the language. Let's say 5 years from now, you can speak Spanish. What happened to your brain? Something changed, right? Connections, myelin, glial cells, all sorts of stuff changed. So your brain is now programmed to speak Spanish. But you didn't learn Spanish by trying to avoid speaking English. Just by stopping English, you're not going to learn Spanish, right?
Right.
Just like learn how to play your concert pianist, you don't become a concert pianist by just looking at the piano. You have to play the piano. So the repetition is the way the brain works, the programming. And so same thing with chronic pain is that the default language is survival, which is adrenaline, cortisol, and histamines. And then you feel anxious. And what you're doing, you're creating a new language that I call an enjoyable life. And you visualize what you want in your life. What do you want your life to look like? And then you pursue it. So you're not going to fix your life by trying to fix the chronic pain, because where's your attention? It's on the pain. So as you create a vision of what you want your life to look like, and we've talked about this book, Getting Things Done, you create a vision, you start to execute, that's where your brain's going to develop. So you're not going to develop Spanish by trying to fix your English. You're not going to develop a new life by trying to fix your pain. Another metaphor is like my bad golf swing. I finally figured out why I had such an ongoing terrible golf swing is I keep trying to fix the problem instead of what I'm trying to create, right? It's not, and it hasn't worked, by the way. I'm a terrible golf swing for 50 years, so it is what it is. So in general, you can't put your attention on what's broken. You had to keep moving forward. Anyway, I'll stop there. But the bottom line, if the only thing you remember from this podcast is the fact that anxiety is simply a neurochemical survival reflex, that thoughts are part of the input that actually creates sustained levels of anxiety / stress chemicals. And the way you decrease anxiety is you decrease the stress chemicals either directly, just drop your shoulders, active meditation or mindfulness, or indirectly with neuroplasticity, with repetition. Between those two tools over time, your brain, once you start the process, it continues the rest of your life. Now, if you decide not to do this, guess what? Your brain will be reprogrammed the same way over and over and over again. That's why as people get older, the behavioral patterns become stronger and more reactive. And you're young, but unfortunately, I get to watch this firsthand now, is that a lot of adults don't get along very well. They're much more, they trigger each other much more than kids in college. I mean, kids in college aren't perfect, but you get people in the room that are in their 60s who complain about their neighbors, they're pissed off at the town hall. I mean, people are angry, they're frustrated, right? Mm-hmm. That energy is not in a college party, right? It's a different energy. But it's not psychological, it's just that these patterns become stronger with age and repetition. Anyway, I'll stop there for a second and we'll jump into the family. Any thoughts from your perspective on what we just talked about?
Well, no, I mean, obviously I think it's amazing stuff. I 100% agree with everything you're saying. I have a thought just with the way that your thought process working with your patients. And I know, you're a spinal surgeon. I just, for my knowledge, what was it like when you started working with these patients and seeing the changes by doing expressive writing and then kind of like cluing this into your colleagues? I just wonder like what their thoughts were, because I know you've talked before about when you perform surgery and you have a high firing nervous system. If you're going to perform surgery on a pain patient, it may make them worse because you're doing incision.
They're fired up, right?
I think it's such a brilliant process the way that you're doing things. What's the thought on the medical side? It blows my mind.
Well, there's a bunch of things going on here. So I don't want to get too negative here, but right now, so first of all, only 20% of physicians actually feel comfortable managing chronic pain. less than 1% enjoy it. I can only tell you that watching people escape chronic pain after being in chronic pain for decades sometimes, it doesn't matter how long you've been in pain, the only obstacle to healing is actually willingness to engage. If you decide you want to learn and go through the process, it may take a week, may take a year, but at some tipping point, your brain actually changes and you break loose. So if somebody decides to engage, it's just a matter of time. It is so exciting. I'd say that treating chronic pain by far and away, without even close seconds, is the most rewarding part of my practice. And of course, it's satisfied. I was a complex surgeon. I did a great job. It was satisfying seeing people get better with surgery, of course. But it's actually more satisfying to see a given person who historically, by the way, even surgical patients actually went to pain-free without surgery. But it's incredibly exciting to see people that are trapped go to pain-free. They can't even put into words how excited they are. And I don't even try. I'm just always astounded. And I've seen hundreds of patients go to pain-free. I can't even estimate how many times it happens. I get emails every week from people all over the country how excited they are. Not only do people break loose of the pain, they start thriving at a level that they never thrived at before. And it's very, very clear that the mental pain is a much bigger problem than the physical pain. And what happens when you're not trapped by anxiety anymore, stress chemicals, you get to thrive. But people thrive at a level that they've never thrived at in their entire life. So it's not just coming out of pain, it's actually developing a life that you can't even imagine existed. Same thing with me. I mean, I was in severe chronic pain for 15 years. I was actively suicidal. I had 19 medical colleagues who did commit suicide. And we get trapped by our profession, lots of stress, lots of anxiety. Physicians won't allow themselves to admit it. I had no choice at the end of the day. And so it's incredibly unbelievable to me is that I just get to live life at a level I just never dreamed existed. I actually enjoy my life. Before I was sort of working at my life and doing my things and doing my life, but now I'm actually experiencing my life. It's remarkable.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I remember listening to one of your podcasts and you were speaking about a colleague who needed spinal surgery, but you said, hey, let's just try, my prehab program. And
Right.
he was kind of giving you a little pushback, but then he came in one day laughing because he was like, I feel great. I don't need surgery. And
Right.
I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, what happened, which is sort of awkward in this medical system. So you asked about my colleagues, is that they're not very happy with me. I mean, the website's free. The process is about 90% self-directed. So it's the book and the website, and 90% of it's on your own. And so where's the revenue with that? It was upsetting to me, and I'm actually writing another book right now called Do You Really Need Spine Surgery? Take Control with a Surgeon's Advice, is that right now we're operating on people's backs that are normal. They're normal spines. There's nothing there. But they're still doing surgery, and you can't fix something that's not there, right? I've always been conservative, so if I can't see it, I can't fix it. Hey, look, sorry, I can't help you out. But I didn't know what to do. Then with the pain project, both surgically and non-surgically, people just consistently got better. I would come out of my clinic every day totally energized and excited about what I was doing. And it just changed my life as far as my practice. But my colleagues never really bought off on this. They just weren't into it. So what's happening in the medical profession is trying to medicalize a neurological problem. Remember, these circuits get memorized. You start doing structural interventions on a neurological problem, it can't work. The key issue, I'm going to go back in the anxiety discussion. So you have a physical threat or a mental threat, creates a stress response. When you have thoughts that you can't escape, that stress response is sustained, right?
Right.
That sustained adverse chemical environment translates into over 35 physical symptoms. Migraine headaches, irritable bowel, spastic bladder, PTSD, tinnitus. There's over 30 symptoms. I had 16 of those at the same time. But remember, each organ has its own unique reaction. And so that sustained mental threat translates into physical symptoms. And what medicine is doing now, we're treating the symptoms, whereas the root cause is really the sustained unpleasant chemistry. Again, by using the tools, just drop your shoulders for a second. Everybody in the audience do that. Done. It's 3 seconds. Just drop your shoulders for a second. Switch sensory input. Again, just one of the tools. And so the expressive writing has been documented to be effective in over 1,000 research papers. 1,000. In fact, if you go to my website and look at the homepage, there's a PDF on anxiety. There's also a PDF I put together on the family patterns, which we may have to do at another conversation where we're going. So I really want to talk about the family in detail. Maybe we'll just do an overview today. Maybe we'll do the podcast here in a week or two. But the family issues are a big deal because what happens, okay, let's go back to anxiety for a second. So I think we should finish the anxiety part before we go to family.
Sorry, I didn't mean to take you off the trail. I do want to.
No, I'm excited about the family stuff, but I really still want to do that in a lot of detail. But I think this was just the stage for it. So when I say the word triggered, what does that mean to you? The word triggered.
Something that sets something off.
Right, but what does that mean? I mean, what gets set off?
I mean, I always think of it in terms of something bad, like
okay, so,
an emotional response has been triggered, or.
But why? Why did you? What? Okay, this is a tricky question. Okay, so this is where the data is there again. So what happens? Something in the present reminded you of something that was dangerous in the past, right? So what happens, that's how, look at my cat. So if my cat has a person come into the house that she doesn't like, the next time that person comes in the house, guess what? She's taken, like today, the maids were here today, right? The housekeepers were here. Guess where she is? She's hiding in the closet. So she knows that. So that's how she learned. All of us have, that's how we survive in this planet. We know what's dangerous. A hot stove's dangerous. Walking out into the street's dangerous, so we don't do that, right? If a car nearly hits us, we have a survival reaction, correct? Trigger means just that anytime you're anxious, you've been triggered. In other words, something in your past said this was dangerous. The current situation is now dangerous. The problem of a rough childhood, which I was one of those, is there's a study called Adverse Childhood Experiences, ACE events. So you come from a chaotic childhood, and they basically measured a score of 8 parameters of physical, sexual, or emotional abuse, neglect, parent in prison, parent on drugs, parent with mental health issues, divorce, etc. Lots of different traumas in the childhood, right? I was raised a very chaotic childhood. If your ACE score, Adverse Childhood Experiences score, is 3 or more, you have double the chance of suicide, depression, anxiety, heart disease, hypertension. I mean, it's unbelievable. But what happens is that you've been programmed by a dangerous past. More things in the present are dangerous to you because your past was so chaotic. And that's where PTSD comes in, because you have something in your past that was terrible. Anything in the present that remotely reminds you of that past experience, bam, you're triggered. So what trigger means, you have an anxiety response, which means you have a chemical response to a current situation. The more situations in your past that seem dangerous, the more you'll be triggered. And that's why people that are from chaotic childhoods tend to be hypervigilant, on guard. It's hard to relax when you're being triggered all day long. The problem with the family, and we'll talk about the solution a little bit later, is that with the family, so each one of us has triggers programmed into us by our parents. And you can talk to your child, but it doesn't matter what you say. It's what you do. So everybody has anxiety, everybody gets frustrated, everybody has their attitudes. Not one of us is remotely perfect. So what happens, your child simply watches you, and if you're anxious, guess what? That anxiety gets programmed directly into your child. Okay, so what happens, your parents have their interaction, so you get programmed by your father or mother or both. And what happens is that if you accept the patterns or adopt the patterns, which you're going to do because that's what you're programmed to do, we call those adoptive patterns. If you reject the patterns, we call those rebellious patterns. The patterns are still running the show. Until you're aware of the patterns that are programmed into your brain, they're going to run the show, right?
Sure.
And I want to take this opportunity to talk about the Hoffman process, which I did about 10 years ago. And I probably had 80 to 90 friends, family, and people that read the book go to Hoffman. It's mentioned on my website under resources, under organizations. But it's a 7-day process in Napa Valley. I've got another friend of mine going next week. And what happens is that it started in the 1960s by Bob Hoffman. And somehow he recognized that this programming takes place. And then what happens, you have your parents' behaviors programmed into you, but they play out in your new family. Because that's where they're going to play out, right? And so my wife went first and had a remarkable experience. I still was not going to go. And the reason why she went, because she got tired of waiting for me to be fixed. I mean, that was her plan. I needed to go to get me fixed, right? What happens, you realize, so I decided finally to go just empirically, just to go. And I'd done a lot of work, and I was actually doing fine. But what the Hoffman process does, it creates a very organized awareness of patterns that are playing out in your life. What blew me away is that you have patterns that you adopt that you may or may not be aware of, that's your parents' behaviors. But if you reject the patterns or have what's called rebellious patterns of behavior, the patterns are still running the show. And so, for instance, what my wife and I found out, just for an example, is that when she was late for something, I would become unreasonably upset. It was ridiculous. Okay. Turns out that my parents weren't on time for anything ever. So I became compulsively on time. Turns out her parents were so compulsively on time, it was unbelievable. So we both had rebellious patterns with her being late and me being on time. It wasn't working very well. But just understanding those patterns, that's what solved the problems, because you can't talk this stuff out. Remember, the unconscious brain is so much more reactive so much more powerful than the conscious brain. So anytime you're anxious or frustrated, you're in a pattern. Now the problem, let's say you say something to me that upsets me. Okay. So I'm anxious, I'm upset, I'm in a pattern, right? Did you cause it, or did it happen to me? Whose fault is that? If you upset me, is it me or is it you?
That's all on you, but I triggered it.
But you're not, it doesn't matter. See, you could trigger it, the bird could trigger it, the tree could trigger it. So it's not your response. So if we're in a relationship, if you're my spouse, it's not your responsibility to avoid my triggers, because you can't do it. The triggers are infinite.
Sure.
Right? So what happens, people in the mode that, well, this upsets my spouse or my partner or whatever it is, and people start tiptoeing around each other to avoid the triggers. And the problem, my wife gets to practice this all the time herself, we're in the same game everybody else is that when she upsets me, I know it's me that got triggered, but it still feels like her, right? Mm-hmm. And so she did the Hoffman process first, I did it second. And absolutely, it took probably a year after that for things to settle down to really understand, because the triggers don't go away. You simply learn tools to process them. And the tools you learn is that you don't talk about your past, you don't analyze anything, it's just an awareness. And then they give you some tools to help separate. Then they just have brilliant reprogramming tools, similar to an athlete or an artist or musician learning a new skill. So remember, it's awareness, separation, reprogramming. So you become aware of the family patterns, then you separate it, then you visualize the alternative, right? And visualization is a very powerful reprogramming tool. And it's been 10 years for me, and I probably use those Hoffman tools more now than I did before. It's also got tremendous leadership potential. Harvard Business School sent their people through Hoffman. Cancer Centers of America sent their entire leadership team through Hoffman. I came out of there with a laser beam focus. I actually accomplished more in the 5 years after Hoffman in a leadership role than I'd done my entire life. And I could go on for a long time about it, but it's not a good place to start. In other words, I put Hoffman into stage 3 and stage 4 on my website because you got to have some basic tools to take advantage of it, because it's an awareness clearing the deck process. It's not a fixing process. And I'm going to go back to the learning a new language metaphor for a second. So if you're going to learn a new language, you can't learn Spanish by trying to fix your English, right? You're not going to learn this enjoyable life by trying to fix your chronic pain, correct?
Sure.
The hardest part about the whole process of coming out of pain is you can't fix yourself. So one of the rules that we'll discuss in our next family show is that if you're in my office as a person in pain, I say, look, when you walk out of the door of my office, you'll never discuss your pain ever the rest of your life. Ever.
Deal.
And people go, what do we talk about? Honestly, I did the same thing. We're in pain. You're legitimately frustrated. Nobody's believing you. And you're on this endless quest to find an answer. You discuss it with everybody you can talk about. And it says, look, you're not going to discuss your pain, your medical care. And by the way, you're not going to complain. Because what happens is that's where your brain is going to develop. And this is all based on neuroplasticity, not psychology. So think of the word neuroplasticity. So anytime the word psychology comes out, just think of the word neuroplasticity. How do I want to sculpt my brain? What do I want my life to look like? What happens, your nervous system will follow that pathway with you. But so psychology has a role. In other words, you can actually work on thought patterns and change the thought patterns. But the basic programming is the basic anxiety response is a massive neurochemical survival response. And by learning to live with it and befriending it, so to speak, it just loses its energy.
Love it.
So I don't know where we are in time, but I think that
Well, I mean,
I just want to set the table for the family being the strongest triggers by far, because
do you have, how much time do you have? Can we talk?
I'm fine. I don't, yeah, I'm good. I'm not in a hurry at all.
I say we do it. Let's talk about family.
Okay, I don't want to bore your audience here.
No, I love this stuff. So sorry if you guys are bored, but I'm sure they're not bored.
Okay, so here's the deal. Okay, the reason why I went into these triggers is because think about this carefully. If somebody on the street, you're walking down the street and somebody says you're ugly, I mean, obviously you don't like it, but it's not going to really bother you, right?
Right.
So the cashier at the register may treat you rudely, which upsets you a little bit. But if your kid acts up, all of a sudden, bam, you're really frustrated and really reactive. And so the deeper your connections in life, specifically your family, the deeper the triggers. So the people that you care about the most tend to be the targets of your frustration, right? Okay. So with kids, what's really perverse about raising children, you have this beautiful baby, you do anything for your child, and all of a sudden the kid's 9 or 10 years old and you're fighting with your child. And you're saying things you never say to me or somebody else, right? It makes no sense. What you're doing, you're actually programming your own triggers. You're programming your child to behave in a way that's going to trigger you back. Make sense?
Can you expand on that a little bit?
Okay, so remember, your child is picking up behavioral patterns from you, right?
Yes.
And again, like every human being, a lot of them aren't great reactions, right?
Right.
So that's the behavior your child is learning. When your child engages in that behavior, guess what? That triggers you. Why else would you have this beautiful baby at 15 months old where the kid's 4 or 5 years old and you're arguing with each other, right? Makes no sense. Okay, so there's another book that you and I talked about before the show called Parent Effectiveness Training. And I made you absolutely promise me you're going to buy this book tonight, right?
Yes.
Okay, number one book I've read in my life. If you had a choice to read my book or reading this book, read this book. It's called Parent Effectiveness Training. Changed my life. I read it when my son was 18 months old. And it's about awareness. And so it first of all takes the parent-child label up. It goes human to human. And my son's 35 now, and he by no means was perfect. But he will honestly tell you that in his entire life that he was never disciplined by me. But he also will tell you that I was extraordinarily strict. So you don't have to discipline your child if he goes, okay, so you and I are in business together, for instance. You use something that I don't like. I'm not going to discipline you, right? Why would I do that? So somehow we put people in a parent-child role. We think, well, that's our responsibility to discipline and guide our child. And he just blows it out of the water. And I could talk about this book for a long time. But anyway, I would just strongly recommend anybody's children, even not just about relationships in general. It's called Parent Effectiveness Training by Dr. Thomas Gordon. And I remember reading it for the first time and going, I can't believe I'm having to read this book to figure this out. It's that brilliant. And you'll see. But it was published in the 70s. It's been around for a long time. He also wrote a book called Leadership Effectiveness Training, which is also very brilliant. But anyway, it's a book to look at. So as far as family patterns, we find out that, let's say you're in chronic pain, the research shows that when the person in pain complains about the pain, they get a predictably hostile reaction from their spouse. They put monitors on 105 couples, and every time the person in pain complained, the spouse would have a hostile reaction. Guess what would happen to the person's pain? It went up, and it would stay up. But what was fascinating to me about the study is the person knew the pain would go up. They knew they'd get a hostile reaction. They still kept complaining. Every couple, every time. Okay, so what we found out is that, again, when you're triggered, is that your body chemistry changes, right? Remember, when you're triggered, you're anxious. We're substituting the word elevated stress chemicals for anxiety, right? Mm-hmm. One of the reactions that these stress chemicals exert on the body is they double the nerve conduction. You feel the pain more. You double the nerve conduction. It makes sense from a survival standpoint because if you're threatened physically or mentally, your body's going to go on high alert, your nervous system's fired up, you're hypervigilant, and you're going to survive. So it doubles the nerve conduction. So guess what? It increases the pain. Not psychological. Mental threat, body chemistry, physical changes. So again, increased pain is one of the physical changes. So that was predictable. So what we found out is that when a person's triggers, stress chemicals go up, and the family is the strongest source of triggers by far. And then with people in chronic pain, it's just devastating to families. It is horrible what chronic pain does to the families. About 3 years ago, my nurse and I somewhat happened on this by accident, but we found out we do all these writing relaxation tools, different stages on the website, and the family triggers would always win. And we just didn't get it for a long time. We finally realized that once you understand the family triggers, that people were getting way better, way quicker by just establishing a few rules. So pretend you're my patient right now, pretend your wife's sitting next to you. And I say, look, first thing I want you to do is that every adult person in the household is to read my book, but separately. So I want you to put a metaphorical 10-foot concrete wall between you that you're not going to discuss your pain or your medical care or complain. That's it. Or by the way, no advice. No criticisms, no advice, none. Okay? Got it?
Got it.
Okay. So I asked all people living in the household that are, teenagers or older to actually read the book and understand the tools, but also to start engaging the website personally. And if your spouse or partner decides not to do it, there's nothing you can do. Everybody gets to make their own choice in the same. So I ask people to engage in the process fully, whether they have pain or not. Everybody does have anxiety. Everybody does have triggers. The second rule is never discuss your pain, ever. And that's true with or without a family situations. As you walk out of the door, you're not going to talk to your friends, colleagues, family members about your pain. What I didn't realize is that people in pain talk about their pain all the time. I just found that out about 4 or 5 years ago. And I get it. I did the same thing. I didn't realize I was doing it. And you do so much, it becomes sort of your identity that your whole life is involved in trying to find a cure for your pain. And then you start bonding with other people in pain. Where's your nervous system developing? Right? So we're talking about neuroplasticity and learning a new language. That's not the language you want to learn. One of the worst prognostic factors for fibromyalgia, for instance, is to belong to a fibromyalgia support group. Now, we found out the group setting is very powerful for getting people out of pain, but when we do our Omega workshops once a year, the number one rule is you cannot discuss your pain. So the group setting is very powerful in the right setting, but what happens in these support groups is that people tend to discuss their pain over and over again. And so it's been documented in research that one of the worst factors for prognosis for fibromyalgia is belonging to a fibromyalgia support group. So that's rule number 2 is never discuss your pain. Number 3 is I want you to spend an hour with your spouse or partner simply remembering when things were really, really fun. Why are you together? And it's interesting because that's actually one of the hardest parts of the process because people that have been in pain have been so beat up by the pain that they don't want to even remember when things were fun. They're so buried beneath all this rubbish that they can't even get there. The other thing is if a person's in pain, the person who is the partner or the family members, they feel pretty beat up. They're pretty tired. And so they're not even in the mood to actually discuss when times are good. But at some point, it may take a few weeks, sometimes a month or two, is to spend an hour in detail, remember the most enjoyable period of your existence together. When were things really fun? Now, it's not positive thinking, which I think is a disaster. Positive thinking is just another way of suppressing negative thinking. But what you're doing, you're reconnecting to a part of your brain that already exists. So remember, neuroplasticity is about a powerful tool, but part of neuroplasticity is actually creating a massive shift in a part of the brain that hasn't been used for a while. For instance, I used to play trumpet in high school. I can't play it now, but I got back and practiced it. Within 3 months, I could be as good as I was in high school, right?
Sure.
I couldn't do the same thing for the piano because it's not there. So by reconnecting with pathways you haven't used for a while, huge shift very, very quickly. But also remember, the essence of the whole healing process is learning to regulate your own body's chemistry. So if you're stressed and anxious, your stress chemicals are up, you use the tools we talked about to go to neutral or to play chemicals. The contrast between a play chemical environment and a stress chemical environment is pretty dramatic, right?
For sure. Can you talk a little bit about play too? I know.
Right. It's not obsessive play to distract yourself. In other words, if you're trying to distract yourself from the pain, that doesn't work. So for instance, about 6 years ago, I realized that, again, when you're at play, your body's full of great chemicals, right? You relax, you're at play. So again, the oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, but it's sort of an attitude of awareness, curiosity, gratitude, wonderment, I made a decision that, work is work, play is play, but why not just take play to work? Why not just start enjoying my staff more, enjoying my patients more? And it worked. It was a huge difference. And the only downside would to our staffs started having such a good time. Each day was like at a summer camp. So we get a little rowdy, but we had a great time. And so just that is an attitude of play that makes a huge difference in your body's chemistry. Okay. But anyway, as far as the family goes, you have to understand the toll that anxiety and anger have taken on your family. They become the targets of your triggers, right? And it feels like them. Somehow we feel like we have a right to take it out on our families, and we actually don't. And the person that you least likely want to take your frustrations out on is your family, right? That it's not fair. The fourth one, which is the last one, and this is where we could spend an entire podcast in this part of it, is that there's a bunch of rules around the family structure that you take the energy that you develop by talking about when things were enjoyable, and you just bring that into your household. You make an absolute steadfast rule that in the household, if you get triggered, you're simply not going to argue or fight in the house. If you have to argue or fight, just take it outside. Every occupant of your household has a right to come home and relax, do their games, watch TV, whatever they want to do, read a book. They have a right to not have to listen to you argue or fight with your sibling or with your spouse, or whatever it is. So it just goes outside. There's one nurse friend of mine who had two teenagers who used to fight a lot, and they probably still are, but she just sends them to the garage. And at a minimum, it cuts down the time fighting by about 3/4. I mean, it's not that much fun to fight in the garage, right? but what you're doing, you're making an absolute safe house. And so when you get triggered, and again, it's not perfect. I mean, my wife, I get triggered 3 to 5 times every day, and we're just learning to. It's like two boxers in a ring. So remember, there's these massive survival patterns that you're not going to talk it out. So talking doesn't work, by the way. So what you do, you just learn to break it up as quickly as you can. And so you just stop and just get out of the room and just don't allow yourself to engage in a fight, because anger is destructive. Nothing good comes out of an argument as far as building the relationship. And so it's really critical just to make your house a safe house. So another corollary to that is that when you're coming home from work, or say you've had a fight with the disability claims examiner or whatever, you're in a bad mood, don't come in the house. There's a thing called mirror neurons that when somebody yawns, other people yawn, right? Well, if you're in a bad mood, other people get to be in a bad mood, but it's not psychological. It's a direct stimulation of that part of your brain. So if you walk through the front door of your house and you're really angry, what happened to your household? It's like a big cloud came in the door, right? Mm-hmm. You just got to make yourself sit on a park bench, go for a drive, take a walk, whatever you do, don't walk in the house until you're absolutely calmed down and actually excited to see your family. And see, the problem is that if you have 19 out of 20 times where you're in a good mood, and that 20th time you're in a bad mood, that's called intimate reinforcement, it doesn't work. So picture your family walking in the door. When you're walking in the door, what do you want them to see? Right? You don't want them to see somebody in a bad mood. You want to see somebody who's in a good mood, happy to see them, excited to be home.
Right.
And it just becomes a discipline. And again, there's a bunch of other things too, but that's sort of the basics of the family issues. But the family issues are not in the book. I just learned this after the book was written about 2 years ago. If you go on my website, there's stage 1, and at the bottom of the 5th step, you'll see, click this link to begin the journey with your family. It opens up to about 20 website posts that describes the various aspects of the family. One of the website posts is called Happily Ever After. But it goes back into these Hoffman concepts of triggers. What breaks up relationships is not rational. You have a life together, you have friends together, you have a family together. Why would you ever break up? Well, it's these triggers. And again, the closer the relationships, the bigger the triggers. And what it is like a reverse magnet, just blows it apart. And so that's where the Hoffman process, another part of the Hoffman process that's so powerful, is that once you de-energize these triggers, there's just game on. You can actually thrive. And they call it a sort of cosmic ping pong game, is that one person simply has to just drop the paddle. Because again, these are survival reactions that are over 1 million times stronger than the conscious brain. and you're not going to talk this stuff out.
Love it. So,
Um,
so a lot of this is all just reflexive pathways within the nervous system, and more specifically within the subconscious brain.
Absolutely. Now, I don't honestly don't understand subconscious and unconscious, but I mean, think about this for a
Primitive.
second. I mean, yeah, I mean, your pupils are dilating, constricting, depending on the light. Your jaw muscles are moving to make sounds. Your tongue's changing shape. I mean, it's all automatic. It's incredible what the nervous system can do with the body. And again, this rational brain processes 40 bits of information per second, where the unconscious brain processes 11 million. It's a complete mismatch. So again, anytime you're anxious or frustrated, remember your family patterns are the deepest ones. It's just this huge, massive triggering response. It's just made a lot worse than chronic pain. So let me go back over the family, review the family just for a second. So the four things are each adult in the household, engage in the book, engage in the website. Number two, never discuss your pain. Number three, remember when things were fun. And number four, create an absolute safe house.
Love it. That, I mean, that right there that's huge. And then we're gonna have to do another one to expand on number 4, I guess.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there.
Um, Real quick question. We have a few comments, if you don't mind me asking, in a couple minutes.
Absolutely, yeah.
From some of the viewers, but also, did you ever find in your practice people who are suffering from chronic pain and discussing it in the household that their spouses would begin to have chronic pain? Was that ever a thing? Some sort of.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's all about stress. I mean, so what happens if you're really tired of your spouse talking about chronic pain, you just start discussing it again. It may not be even a physical pain, but certainly the mental pain, the anxiety goes up, frustration goes up, because what happens, you've now triggered your spouse. So the people in the family really, really get worn down with people discussing the pain. Every time the pain topic comes up, guess what? The rest of the family now gets triggered. So if they have their own pain issues themselves, their body chemistry is changed, and that can set the whole process off.
Amazing. We have a few of our viewers. We have a few people who have suffered traumatic brain injuries, and then also someone similar along that pathway, someone who suffered a stroke, chronic pain after stroke. How can these play a role in certain types of conditions?
Oh, it's huge. Yeah. No, I mean, there's a book that I keep giving all these books. There's also a book called The Brain That Changes Itself by Dr. Doige, Doige. It's a New York Times best-selling book. Have you read that?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
I mean, if you remember, there's a gentleman in there whose father had a pretty severe stroke, and really just through sheer amount of repetition, got the guy almost back to walking normally.
Yep.
But the brain's incredibly neuroplastic, but you have to program it. You have to keep, in other words, you create your vision, what do you want to do? And the other thing I learned about a long time ago is that people with chronic diseases, whatever the disease is, Parkinson's, MS, whatever it is, they're not very happy about it, right?
Right.
And so what happens, the disease is bad enough, but all of us know that I said, look, forget about the pain for a second, forget about the disease for a second, just think about a day when you're unhappy. It's not a great day. And what happens once people understand that, and they actually can process, remember, you can't get rid of anxiety and anger. They're powerful emotions. You can't suppress them. As you learn to process them and de-energize them, you can begin to thrive. Doesn't matter what the disability is. And then I'm not saying you can, I don't know what the potential is on a given stroke. I'm not really remotely trying to pretend that. But you can definitely maximize your capacity to function by using these tools, whatever your disability is.
Love it. You mentioned one thing in another podcast I was listening to about recommendations for people with families, like new families starting out. And one thing you said was allow your children to fail.
Right.
Can you just touch on that real quick, just from a selfish question?
Well, let me ask you that question. I mean, I had a tough childhood. I wasn't very happy about it. But I will tell you, I owned everything. I mean, by the time I was 14 years old, 12 years old, I started taking care of the family. Basically left the house when I was 16. But I felt really good about being able to take care of myself. And I made an endless number of mistakes. But it's like going on the ski slope, and the first thing you have to learn to do is to learn how to stop, right?
Right.
Once you know how to stop, then you actually can start to ski. Once you know how to fail, then you can actually start to take risk. If you don't know how to fail, you're going to be afraid to take risk, right? You can't really live your life in an expansive way unless you're willing to fail. So you have to understand failure. And I think, and I was probably somewhat guilty of overparenting. I'm not saying that my generation didn't do a lot of this, but what we learned through sort of a harsh process is that when you don't allow your child to fail, you're really saying, I don't trust you. I don't trust you to solve your own problem, right? So it's really, really critical to allow yourself to let your kids own it completely. Success is also. When you try to get too much, you try to take too much of the limelight with your kids' successes, it's sort of the same issue. But yeah, they have to absolutely learn how to fail.
Love it. Sorry, that was a random question. And then one more question for people who have chronic pain and they're just trying to suppress it.
Uh-huh.
What can that do to the nervous system?
It just ramps it way, way up. I mean, that's been one of the most discouraging parts of the process. I didn't realize this, but I said this early in the program, is that the number one factor that determines people getting better is their willingness to learn. And unfortunately, these obsessive thought patterns get into place, these racing thoughts get into play. There's like a little mini tornado, and like those little sage dust balls that are in the prairie. What are those called? They're little
Wind dust balls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I call it phantom brain pain, which is similar to phantom limb pain, is that you get these obsessive thought patterns. The doctor's missing something, the doctor's saying my pain's in my head, et cetera, et cetera. So you get these obsessive thought patterns. It's actually part of the disease that actually blocks the treatment. It's really, really tragic. And so it's probably at least half the people I come in contact with are in that mode. They're so angry, they're so frustrated, they're so wrapped up. And they're these obsessive, irrational thought patterns that you can't reason with. And anytime and all you can do is, I don't know, honestly, it's such a really discouraging topic. I honestly have not, so when someone says they have a little scale of 0 to 10 of 0's no anxiety, 10's severe anxiety. If they have chronic pain and put themselves as a 0 on anxiety, I literally just give up, honestly. I've never broken through. So people get so shut down, and that means they just aren't willing, they can't honestly see the world through other people's eyes. There's nothing you can do. It's really, I think, a tragedy.
Absolutely. And would you say the same goes for the family aspect of it, these triggers, if you're just trying to suppress instead of own it and learn it and try to, I guess, repath I don't know.
Well, I think Dr. Schubert, who's one of my mentors, he wrote a book called Unlearn Your Pain. He said it really clearly. He said emotional pain and physical pain are processed in the same part of the brain. If you don't allow yourself to feel emotional pain, another part of your body is going to light up. For me personally, I honestly did not feel, I was a fearless surgeon, right? I actually suppressed anxiety so well that I honestly didn't know I had it. Same thing with anger. I didn't know I had anger. I thought it was pretty cool. So it was a big problem. So what was happening, I was having migraine headaches, my ears were ringing, my feet were burning, my back hurt. So I had all these physical symptoms that I didn't connect with the fact that my body chemistry was elevated. When the anxiety finally broke through, in other words, when the stress chemicals hit a certain point, it was like the top of a pressure cooker lid just blowing off. It was just brutal. I went from no anxiety, I swear to God, to panic attacks in one day. It was unbelievable.
Great. It was all just building up.
So also, I was so good at, in fact, unfortunately, what happens with suppressing is that it's what people use to become, quote, successful. They're just fearless. They have strong willpower. It's mind over matter, and it works until it doesn't. Right. And then, unfortunately, what happens is that when you are suppressing, you may not feel anxious. And remember, one of the antidotes to anxiety is control. So a lot of people in a little world are controlling their environment, including their family. But it doesn't make for a very positive environment for your family. It doesn't make for a very rich, full life. And again, the antidote to anxiety is control. When you lose control, you become angry, right? And so anger and anxiety are the same thing. The other antidote for anxiety is rigid, structured thinking. So if you have strong political, religious, nationalistic opinions, your mind's in a deep, deep rut. Anxiety really isn't an option because you're so concrete in your thinking. And guess what? That works too. For the person who's doing it, it doesn't work very well for the people around that person.
Interesting.
So if you get really strong opinions, and that's, again, a whole different conversation, it's a huge problem. And that was me. I had this incredible set of ideals, and I remember reading a Joseph Campbell book saying how idealism is dangerous. I'm going, are you kidding me? What are you talking about? I mean, that was my entire life. I constructed my life based on ideals. But what happens once you become idealistic, you lose your perspective. That becomes your filter. You can't really see the world through other people's eyes. And so, yeah.
Amazing. All right, one last question. So there's a lot of people that are involved in alternative healthcare here, and some functional medicine followers. What role does nutrition play in this? I know we've talked a lot about plasticity, but
well, it's big. I mean, there's three parts to solving chronic pain. First of all, understanding it. In other words, becoming aware of it. The second part is treating every aspect simultaneously. It's like fighting a forest fire. What mainstream medicine is doing, we're taking a complex problem like pain, which is affected by many factors, but we're throwing random simplistic solutions to it. So there's sleep, there's stress, there's exercise, there is nutrition. So the mistake people make, say, well, I did all this nutrition things and I still hurt, or I tried acupuncture and it didn't work. Well, the nutrition could help 10, 15%. Anti-inflammatory diet for some people is miraculous. And so it's one of those things where where nutrition is, yes, absolutely critical. In fact, the gut bacteria is actually the precursor of serotonin, an antidepressant. It also makes melatonin. That comes from the gut bacteria.
Love it.
So nutrition is part of it. But again, everything works a little bit. Nothing works by itself.
100%. Love it. All right. Well, I can't thank you enough for your time. I'll probably bug you and ask you to do another one of these down the road.
Oh, no, I love it. So I'd love to talk about sort of get into some of the stories we got into about the family triggers. And it's just been, I tell you, of all the excitement I've had about seeing people get better in chronic pain, watching the whole family unit heal literally at the same time, it's just been a remarkable experience. By the way, I actually know one of the questions. So do you know what the most common trigger we found in the families was? I mean, I swear to God, this is true. It's unbelievable. Probably 80% of our people were triggered by one specific thing. Just take a guess what that might be.
Oh my gosh. TV at dinner time.
That's not bad.
I have no idea.
It's how they load the dishwasher.
No way.
I'm not kidding. I mean, my nurse would walk out of the room and she just dropped her jaw and goes, it's the darn dishwasher again. And so, I mean, then you see it right in the room, they're in clinic, they start getting into it about the dishwasher. But I'm saying the triggers are irrational. That's what I'm saying. They're so irrational. So do you think you would be, if you're on a first date with your now wife or partner, that you'd be upset about the dishwasher? No.
We just let the dishes soak overnight when we first started dating.
Right. So I'm serious. These are really, really deep triggers.
That's amazing.
But that's what I'm saying. Look up on my website. It's called Happily Ever After. Again, it points out how what blows marriages apart is a neurological trick. It's just a trick. And once you understand the trickery around it, then you can sort of de-energize the whole thing and just move on. So I call it solving the unsolvable. You're not going to get rid of anxiety. You're not going to get rid of anger. You have to be able to experience them, but you can't let it run your life. So you can't control the reaction, but you can control your response to it.
I mean, did you ever think that you were going to be at first a spinal surgeon, then an expert in healing chronic pain neurologically, and now you're saving marriages?
No. Well, no, I know it's just been a remarkable journey. I mean, totally unexpected. So yeah, it just continues to be, and the thing that's getting better for me is that we've explained so often, we've seen so many things that don't work. We're able to be clear where people get stuck, help them move forward. And we're just getting better at helping people see the way through it. But the third part of getting better, by the way, which I didn't mention, the first part is understanding the problem, awareness. Second part is dealing with every aspect simultaneously. But the third part, which is absolutely necessary, since each person is unique, is you take control of your own care. You have to take charge of your own care. And once you understand the problem and keep researching it, it's just game on, just a matter of time.
Thank you so much. And for people that are just like, if they want to know where to get started, is the best place to get started with your book or with the website? What would you recommend? I mean, I know your book's got
I
so
would
much.
say start. Well, I just say do both. I mean, just look at the book as a back. See what the book does. It gives you the context. In other words, the book is not a self-help book. It's a framework. It helps you organize your thinking around a framework, and then the website is the action plan. So it's a lifetime process. I always tell people there's no beginning or end to this, and so there's no rush to get through the book. There's no rush to get through the website. There's no rush to go through all the stages. And every week you'll look at different parts of it. There's different stages of it. It's not linear at all. And it's just an ongoing day-to-day, week-by-week process. And because there's no goal to this process. Why would that be? Why is there no goal to the back and control process?
So you don't stress out about reaching the goal?
Right, that's one of them. But also you're trying to fix yourself,
Right.
right? If you have a goal to be a certain way, where's your attention? It's on yourself. So if your attention's on your life you want to live, on other people's needs, on getting your perspective back in life, that's where life is going to go. If the goal is self-improvement, again, your attention's going exactly the wrong direction. That's the paradox of the whole process, that once people flip that paradigm, it really changes things dramatically.
Awesome.
So,
Well, I can't thank you enough again for your time, and thank you everyone for tuning in. I'll make sure to post the website and a link to Dr. Hanscom's book in here because people have been asking about that. But again, thank you so much, Dr. Hanscom. If you can